Truth can be stranger than fiction, and I understand that what I might be sharing with you could be a little controversial, but what if I said that government must function as a very violent religion? In fact, you can look at something called democide, which stands for death by government, and it is the #1 cause of death worldwide. So this is something that we say we have government to create order, but what if it's actually always creating chaos, and how come we can never find the perfect form that works for humanity? And we've tried that for thousands of years. Are there other problems we're not looking at, and we're trying to basically vote new people in, change laws, and it's not actually working? Or even better yet, you're just a human being like me who just cares about others, and you don't really care much about politics. And you just want a better world, and sometimes you feel like politics is the best way to get that. But what if it's not actually even necessary? What if the whole ritual of politics is actually reinforcing the problem? I mean, these are questions that a lot of people in politics are never going to ask you, but I'm going to ask you that question. And in fact, Dr. Carl Jung shares us insights about that very thing I'm talking about. And he really goes in detail with it to make really shocking statements. So let us continue our series on exploring the insights of Dr. Carl Jung about the very nature of the state, the dangers of government, and the role of nonviolent religion as the strongest bulwark against statist tyranny. Now, if you don't know what the word statist means, I'll put some definition on the screen for you with a couple questions as well, so you can pause the video and think about this for yourself. Now, as we continue, all of this information that we're going to talk about, a lot of it is based on the book The Undiscovered Self. In our last video, we saw that the government seeks to supplant religion in the hearts and minds of people, replacing in God or the gods with subservience to and faith in the power of the government to create a secular Eden. In exchange for this impossibility, those in power demand total obedience to their wills. Here we look at Dr. Jung's description of why people so willingly surrender to the state. Quote, "All mass movements, as one might expect, slip with the greatest ease down an inclined plane represented by large numbers. Where the many are, there is security. What the many believe must of course be true. What the many want must be worth striving for, and necessary and therefore good. In the clamor of the many, there lies the power to snatch wish fulfillments by force. Sweetest of all, however, is that gentle and painless slipping back into the kingdom of childhood, into the paradise of parental care, into happy-go-luckiness and irresponsibility. All the thinking and looking after are done from the top. To all questions there is an answer, and for all needs the necessary provision is made. The infantile dream state of the mass man is so unrealistic that he never thinks to ask who is paying for this paradise. The balancing of accounts is left to a higher political or social authority, which welcomes the task, for its power is thereby increased, and the more power it has, the weaker and more helpless the individual becomes." So that's from pages 41 and 42 of The Undiscovered Self. People surrender their liberty, their children, and their lives to the government because it feeds them the fiction that they will be able to give up all adult responsibility for themselves and slip back into the kingdom of childhood where father state and mother country will provide for every need of the people if they do only what they're told to do. This can be connected to the French political and economics philosopher Frédéric Bastiat in his definition of the state. In his 1848 essay titled The State, Bastiat wrote that the state is the great fiction by which everyone endeavors to live at the expense of everyone else. You might be tempted to think that people believe these obvious fictions because no one cares that what they want is impossible for anything lesser than a god. But as Jung suggests, it cannot be ignored that people believe these lies because they actually have deep faith in the godlike omnipotence of the state to do the impossible. In either case, whether they consciously think of the state as God or merely treat it as such, the outcome is the same. They seek to avoid responsibility for their own lives in the arms of the state. The 2018 study, Religion as an Exchange System, the Interchangeability of God and Government in a Provider Role, evaluated the way that religion shrinks as the size of government grows, and concluded that, quote, the power and order emanating from God can be outsourced to the government, end quote. That study drew direct connections between the perceived effectiveness of government social and welfare programs and the decrease in religiosity in the public. Though it ignores the indoctrinating and secularizing effect of government schools on the public, its implication that faith in God gets replaced by faith in the state because of the perceived ability of those in power to work social miracles, such as ending poverty, is quite revealing. So, as Dr. Jung notes, those in power not only welcome this outsourcing of faith to them, those in power positively encourage it. They do so because it means the surrender of the people to those who control the apparatus of the state, politicians. As a result, politicians are continually working to fill the minds of the masses with greater and greater promises of an eternal childhood. In order to appear to try and accomplish the things that the state promises, it, and thereby its managers, must ever increase its power in order to accept all the responsibilities of adulthood and provide all the pleasures of existence to the people. Their inability to produce their secular Eden becomes a justification for the centralization of more power and not proof of the failures of their doctrines. The synthesis of these points made by Dr. Jung that we have studied thus far then is the essence of why the governments of men are the enemies of God. The state by its very nature is set in opposition to religion and therefore God. Both God and the state demand to be treated as the supreme authority in the life of the individual. The state always seeks to control and dominate religion, to subject it to the authority of the laws of man, because religion demands that the individual places God and his laws above all, meaning that when God and government contradict, then men should always obey God and not the state. Thus, the state and its politicians cannot allow religion because it subverts the authority and the power of the state, which is the authority and power of the politicians in control of the apparatus of the state. In order to combat religion, then, the state tries to overwhelm the individual with the power of the masses to make him feel as a meaningless cog in the machinery of the state whose job is to obey, and to undermine the religious feelings of men by promoting the state in a religious manner, by essentially rendering the state into a secular religion itself, furnished with all the rites and rituals that accompany religion. The outcome of all of this is a secular religion that promises a material paradise for the faithful in a physical prison and death for those who challenge its commandments, its laws. And so this is a very stark reality that people in religion and people in politics will never make the connection to. In fact, people use religion as a justification for politics and vice versa. But what if they actually are opposed? And we've talked about this in this series very deeply with Dr. Jung's insights as well. It's quite shocking that religion, voluntary most of the time that people partake in, can be turned into something involuntary and thus turned into something very, very dangerous. I mean, there's tons of videos online talking about the crusades and the jihads and all the events in history done in the name of religion. But they were done with the state, with government at its disposal. So it's interesting to see that these belief systems can be tied to one belief system that is solely responsible really for the violence of all these religions. responsible for the violence of all human history, the aggregated violence, because there's always going to be criminals and people who do wrong. But here is an example of aggregated mass wrong. You're looking at war, you're looking at democide, and these things would not happen if the masses of people do not believe the few have the authority or have that power. We ask ourselves and say, why do these few people have that power over all the masses? It's because the masses were trained to believe in authority. So even when they replace that authority or they change a law, they still believe in the rituals. They still believe in that religion. And that is what makes it dangerous. Not actually who is in the seat of that religion. It's the religion itself, which is why a lot of people in this community might just shut off all religion and say religion is the problem. And I can understand when you say that. But really, if we want to get really clear, it's statism, this dangerous religion, the involuntary, violent religion. Because you can operate as a Buddhist, a Hindu, a Christian in this world, and you may actually even follow your own principles and say, I apply the golden rule, I apply do unto thy neighbor, I acknowledge I have a master that's higher than man. You could even make the case and say that supports voluntarism or abolitionism or the idea that humans are meant to be free. But you can practice that no matter what you believe in, as long as you do not impose on others, as long as you do not violently make others comply to the way you look at the world. And this is the key, humility. A lot of these teachings talk about humility, but it can get overshadowed by, oh, well, if they don't believe what I believe, then they must be damned. They must go to hell. They must do this or that. And we have to be very careful with those, because throughout history, has caused a lot of problems. People believe in their text, they believe in the authority of human beings, and it gives it way more power than it needs to have, or it is in reality. We could just see it as words on a piece of paper. We could just see other human beings as just human beings, but instead we put a crown on them, we put a fancy outfit on them, and we assume they are now the president, they are now the minister, they are now the king or queen. And now they have more rights that everyone doesn't have. So what are we doing when we do that? We are dehumanizing and putting ourselves lower and pushing someone up on a pedestal. And we got to be careful, because even the Taoist ancient Chinese wisdom told us that those who stand on tiptoe can't stand very long, right? And those who try to shine dim their own light. So let us understand this polarity in the universe, this going against nature that will not last and will not sustain. So if we want to make sure we do, go to theliberator.us. Go to theliberator.us, send us your article, I'll turn it into a video for you. And be sure to visit thelatterdayLiberator.com, thelatterdayLiberator.com, because this article was written by William H. Douglas, and he is my co-editor for theliberator.us. Thank you for watching.